Her 9000's Game Room.
Sometimes when you look back on certain video games, they remind you of more than the game. Sometimes they remind you of a time, a place or a person. A lot of the games I've reviewed and talked about have connections like this. Combat Tribes, which I have previously reviewed for example, reminds me of a local pizza parlour in my hometown. The main reason for this is because they had it in there for a long time as an arcade machine. It was pushed in the corner and you'd stick a few 20p pieces in it and see how far you could get while you were waiting for your pizza to be made. Most of the time this would be after having seen something in the local cinema. The cinema is gone now, the arcade machine's gone now, the pizza parlour's still going strong, but every time I walk past it I look in that lonely corner and sigh wishing there was still an arcade machine in it. The game I'm going to talk about today though doesn't remind me of a time or place, it reminds me of a person. A friend. This particular friend had a love of RPG style games that seemed to have no limit. He was the first one to get and play all of the Final Fantasy games, Secret of Mana, etc. Most people would quickly see what he had gotten, and after listening to him excitedly go on and on about it, or after him turning up at their house with it singing its praises, well, let's just say they would be buying it as soon as possible. One game though he just couldn't seem to get anyone interested in was Shadowrun. I have to admit, on first glance even I couldn't see what it was that attracted him to it. After sitting and watching him restart the game in front of me though, it wasn't long before I was asking for a go myself. Before this I'd heard a little about the original Shadowrun, the pen and paper role-playing game upon which this SNES game was based, but when it came to that kind of thing the people I knew were generally into Citadel Miniatures, Warhammer 4000 and the like. But knowing Shadowrun was based on this sort of thing at the time did give me a rough idea of what to expect from it. Shadowrun is probably best described as a cyberpunk fantasy action role-playing game for the Super Nintendo. As previously mentioned, it's adapted from a tabletop role-playing game, also called Shadowrun. This game was developed by the Australian company Beam Software, who by this point already had been massively influential developers responsible for such massive home micro hits as The Hobbit, a 1982 text adventure game based on the J.R.R. Tolkien novel, which sold more than 1 million copies, and The Way of the Exploding Fist, a very important title which helped define the genre of one-on-one fighting games. And in 1992 they released the original title Nightshade, a dark superhero comedy game for the original Nintendo Entertainment System. This game was meant to be the first part in a series, but no sequels were ever made. However, it served as the basis for Shadowrun. Beam Software doesn't properly exist anymore. It was kind of swallowed up by bigger studio after bigger studio until what was left of it was sold to Chrome Studios in 2006. Shadowrun was released in 1993 by Data East, who existed between 1976 to 2003 and released 150 video game titles. Most of Data East's video game library was acquired in February 2004 by Gmode, a Japanese mobile game content provider. However, some former Data East games are also owned by Payon Corporation, Kadauka Games, Arc System Works, D4 Enterprise and Tactron Corporation. Apparently the development of Shadowrun for the SNES was a turbulent one, which includes its development being halted midway through before being resumed in late 1992 under a tight deadline. The game was a critical success, winning a number of industry awards, but unfortunately it was a commercial failure. Later though, it's become something of a cult classic, with it being seen now as being ahead of its time, with it often being credited for having pioneered the use of a film noir style in video games. Okay, so let's leave the game's history and development there and move on to the story, which goes a little like this. It is 2050, you play a guy called Jake Armitage, an information courier who is shot, supposedly dead, and taken to the morgue. You wake up on the slab with a sore head and no idea of who you are. Your basic mission throughout the game is to try and work out who you are and what happened to you. You're in a world with guns which are basically based on sort of current technology, but then there are orcs and trolls, and no, not the dumb kind who walk around naked holding spears and axes grunting. No, these guys wear leather jackets, have shotguns, pistols, Uzis, and are hacking computers and hiring themselves out as thugs, protectors, hackers, killers, etc. I won't spoil any more of it than this, but this gives you a basic idea of the world the game is set in and your place within it. Okay, so to get a few things out of the way, this is not a graphically impressive game. For a start, the sprites are small, sometimes rather lacking in detail, but there's often quite a lot of enemies moving around the screen, shooting all over the place, so you can kind of see why. The levels of animation on the sprites are also at times rather limited, and there are issues of repetition with sprites and the portraits used for faces when you're speaking with people. You see some of this stuff being reused again and again. I can see why some people would be put off by this, but it would be a shame if people were to judge it based on appearances and not to try and get into it. This does make the game a bit of a hard sell if you're showing it to someone. It is not really a game which you can get a proper feel for just by looking at it. This is one of the reasons it's taken me so long to get around to recording a review of it. I've deliberately made sure to only record stuff from near the beginning of the game because I think one of the greatest strengths this game has is its story and how it progresses, it twists and turns, and I didn't want to spoil this for anyone who decides they'd like to give this a try. The music is decent and easy enough to listen to, but it's not that impressive when compared to some of the beautiful RPG soundtracks that found their way onto the SNES. But it fits and it doesn't annoy, so it works. It's functional and enjoyable enough, but it never sets the world on fire. As for how the game plays, well, it almost feels like you should be playing it with a mouse. It's part RPG, but then there's also at times a sort of point and click element to it. You highlight doors or cupboards and select options like look, open, etc. You also do the same sort of thing when interacting with individuals, picking what you want to say. The talking with people part is handled quite interestingly. There are various topics of conversation that you can use that come from a database, which can be made larger through picking up new terms from the people you talk to. So to explain this, imagine you're talking with a person and they mention a club, the Purple Banana. Then you see the name of this club, it's highlighted, and if it's highlighted it goes into your topics database. So next time you talk to someone else, you'll be able to ask them about the club by selecting the Purple Banana from your list of conversation topics. This actually makes you feel like you have a lot more freedom than in some games when it comes to talking to other characters. There's a lot of unneeded answers added in just to make the world feel real, and I appreciate the effort that's gone into this. So the graphics are not amazing, nor is the sound. The story is interesting if cliched at points, but the world they've built up around the game feels big and real. If you can get past how basic it looks on the surface and get your head in the game, get your heart into the story, then you have an incredible game here. I feel very comfortable giving this game a very hearty recommendation and scoring it 9 out of 10. It only loses out on perfection due to its lack of graphical and audio polish and a bit of repetition, but none of its issues can hold it back once you've found yourself deep in its clutches. It is also quite a long game, so provides a good ratio of bang for your buck. An English cart typically seems to end up going for around the £35 to £40 price point last time I looked, which is a lot. I haven't even seen a boxed one in I don't know how long, but if you can play American games you can sometimes, with some searching, cut that price down to around £25. And this is a rare case where I'd say it's worth it. Also, to my knowledge, there's never been a digital virtual console version of this on any system. As a side note, if you don't want to invest so highly in this game, either because it's a fair bit of cash or you're worried it won't be your thing, there are some semi-new PC Shadowrun games available on Steam, which are very much in the style of this game. Shadowrun Returns from 2013 and Shadowrun Hong Kong from 2015 are both around the region of about £10 each-ish last time I looked, but I've seen them go down to as low as about £4 during Steam or Humble Bundle store sales. So if this sounds interesting, keep your eyes open. Having played and finished the SNES Shadowrun and been left feeling like I wanted more, I purchased these new PC Shadowrun games and I really enjoyed them, so would recommend these games to fans of the SNES original, and I'd also argue that they're a lot easier to get into for modern gamers. So what happened to my friend who introduced Shadowrun and SNES to me? Well, he's moved to America now and, to my knowledge, no longer plays video games. I don't get to talk to him that often as he's busy with his work and family. But it's one of those childhood friends that I always think back on and remember fondly. I remember him as that guy that's excited to get brand new RPG and burn his way through it. I remember him even getting some of them in Japanese and ploughing his way through. And I'll never be able to play a Shadowrun related game without thinking about him. Okay, so that's Kerr9000 signing off saying keep on gaming.